For nearly a century, they've been these untouchable symbols of American power. But now, they're targets. Today, we're going to dig into the hidden history of U.S. military bases all across the Middle East and figure out why they've suddenly become the central flashpoint in a very dangerous new shadow war.
Okay, so let's start with a question that might seem a little confusing at first. We keep seeing these headlines about Iran launching attacks, but here's the weird part. The targets aren't just American or Israeli. They're hitting their own Arab neighbors. We're talking Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. So why? Why would Iran attack them? The answer isn't so much about who they're attacking, but what's inside those countries.
And the answer is actually pretty simple. Iran says the countries themselves aren't the target. The real targets are the American military bases that are hosted inside their borders. Which, of course, just leads to an even bigger question. Why are those U.S. bases there in the first place?
To really get what's happening right now, we have to rewind the clock. Because the idea of a foreign power using military bases to control the Middle East, well, that's nothing new. It's basically an old playbook just passed down from one empire to the next.
So, after World War I, the massive Ottoman Empire just collapses. It creates this huge power vacuum. And who sweeps in to fill it? The British Empire, of course. But then, after World War II, Britain is financially shattered. As they start to pull out, a new superpower is waiting in the wings, ready to take their place. And that's the United States.
The British were really clever with their strategy. They knew the local populations would never accept a foreign ruler, so they set up what our source material calls the puppet king model. They let local kings handle all the day-to-day civil stuff, which gave the appearance that they were still in charge. But the real power, all the military and defense decisions, that was held by Britain, operating from its network of bases.
Being totally drained by the war, Britain just couldn't afford its empire anymore. So as they pulled out of the Middle East, the U.S. stepped right in. Now, at first, the American presence was pretty small, just a few bases here and there to protect oil interests. But Washington had seen the British model of control, and they liked it. They just needed a good reason to expand.
So America needed a justification, right? An excuse to build the kind of massive, permanent bases it really wanted. And that justification was about to arrive in the form of one man, Saddam Hussein. The whole mess after the Iran-Iraq War created the perfect opportunity.
Get this, after fighting a brutal 8-year war with Iran, a war his Arab neighbors actually encouraged, Saddam Hussein was in a massive hole. He owed $60 billion, and a lot of that was to Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. They wanted their money back. But Saddam, he had other plans for settling his debts.
Now, Saddam was worried about what the Americans might do, so he met with the U.S. ambassador first. The source alleges that the ambassador told him the U.S. had no opinion on conflicts between Arab nations, like his little border dispute. To Saddam, that sounded a lot like a green light. And just days later, his tanks rolled right into Kuwait. According to the source, this was all part of a very calculated American plan. Step 1, you let Saddam invade. Step 2, you paint him as a massive threat to the entire region. Step 3, you go to all the other Arab leaders who are now terrified and you offer them protection. And the final crucial step, the price for that protection would be getting their permission to build a whole network of large, permanent U.S. military bases on their soil. And well, the strategy was a huge success. And just like that, the U.S. had its permanent foothold. But these bases weren't just for sitting around and playing defense. Nope. They were about to become the launch pads for the next 30 years of American warfare all across the region. I mean, just think of all the major conflicts since then. The war in Afghanistan, the 2003 invasion of Iraq, the bombing campaigns in Syria, operations in Libya, airstrikes in Yemen, all of them were launched or heavily supported from this network of bases, many of which were hosted by countries that were supposedly neutral. And the source points out another critical job for these bases. They acted as a huge protective shield for Israel. They allowed the U.S. to project its power, defend its key ally, and neutralize threats in the region before they could even get started.
And that brings us right back to today. For decades, this network of bases guaranteed American dominance. But now, for the first time, a regional power is systematically and directly striking back, challenging that control head-on.
The source describes a pretty sophisticated strategy here. First, Iran sends a wave of cheap decoy drones.
Their only job is to get the base's air defenses all lit up and busy. So while the systems are distracted, tracking and shooting down dozens of worthless targets, that's when the real weapons are launched. The claim is they're using advanced missiles that hit while the base is effectively defenseless.
And the damage they've reportedly caused is significant. At Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, a $1 billion radar system was taken out. In Kuwait, a major vehicle and missile warehouse was hit. In Saudi Arabia, 5 large aircraft destroyed. These were precise, crippling strikes against extremely high-value American military assets.
But the fallout from all of this is, well, it's complicated. The aftermath is just a storm of conflicting reports, denials, and accusations, and it's creating a dangerously unstable situation. A really big point of debate is the collateral damage. While the strikes were aimed at military targets, some civilian buildings were hit too. So who's responsible for that?
Well, there are 3 competing stories here. First, Iran has apologized for some of the strikes, calling them mistakes. Second, for other hits, Iran insists they weren't civilian buildings at all, but secret CIA and Mossad offices. And then there's a third, pretty explosive allegation, that Mossad agents themselves carried out false flag attacks designed to be blamed on Iran, to try and drag the whole region into a bigger war.
One thing's for sure, this situation is far from over. A statement from Iran's supreme leader makes their position crystal clear. And their view, the very presence of these bases is the root of the conflict. And as long as they remain, this shadow war is very likely to continue.